Have you ever wanted an optimistic view of the future? If so, stay with me because I think the book I'm going to talk about gives quite an optimistic vision. It's called Half-Earth by Edward Wilson. In this work, his thesis is that half the earth should be devoted to nature, that is, half the land and the oceans. He explains that goals are much better than just reassurance that conservation work is being done. He was an entomologist and he sees great value in small life forms naturally and criticizes those who don't comprehend the value of smaller life forms. Part 1 starts off with him talking about periods of geological time and the importance of biodiversity. He talks about the way that species are going extinct in part 1, and he talks about the rhinos in one particular chapter, which is very good, I think. It's interesting to me that the rhino population has shrunk from millions to just over 20,000. Part 1 is based on him setting up the problem that we face. He talks about how extinctions are accelerating and that conservation doesn't go far enough. He talks about 5 major factors that are increasing environmental degradation. These are habitat destruction, invasive species, pollution, population growth, and overhunting. I find there's a real optimism to this book. He talks about the resilience of marine ecosystems because they have been relatively undisturbed, and sees the degradation of coral reefs as an exception to the rule. I like the way he often quotes clever people from across the arts and the sciences. For example, he quotes a guy called Wallace Stegner, who wrote in 1983, "American national parks are the best idea we ever had." Part 2 of this book goes quite in depth into biological things, so it won't appeal to everyone, but it's still kind of a popular science book, this, so people who aren't very into science may still enjoy reading it. In this part, he sets out his theory that it's important to conserve whole ecosystems and not just conserve the parts of ecosystems that are useful to humans. He also talks about the importance of ecosystem studies, which he sees as a much neglected area of science. For obvious reasons, there's not much money in it relative to medicine. In part 3, he sets out the solutions as he sees it to the problems we face. He's obviously a fan of technology and strongly believes that whole ecosystems need to be conserved. Otherwise, we are taking a massive, massive risk as a human race. There's a great chapter on restoration where he talks about two entrepreneurs who have done restoration work. MC Davis was an entrepreneur who bought up land in Florida and re-energized these ecosystems by planting some trees that had been clear-cut away for profit in the past. Hence, these woodlands in Florida are now rich ecosystems that rarely catch fire. The other entrepreneur he mentions is a guy called Greg Carr, who did a lot of good conservation work in Mozambique. The chapter called Threading the Bottleneck is, in my view, the most interesting chapter in this work because he sets out how he thinks we can achieve half Earth. He has some good ideas about how we can reduce world population, and he thinks technology will naturally make it so that we all have smaller environmental footprints. He says there should be cameras in these massive nature reserves so that we can all enjoy nature from our homes. There's a very interesting little quote I'm gonna give here. He believes that there should be a replacement of extensive economic growth by intensive economic growth. In this chapter, he's optimistic that we can tackle climate change and optimistic that AI and other technologies will help us steer the world in the right direction. He thinks that AI and other forms of technology will greatly help the field of ecology, which he really sees as the key to the future. Throughout this work, there are quite frequent jibes at religion, which might put some readers off, but if you read closely, it shows that he's quite open-minded about spirituality. So this shouldn't put you off. This is really a popular science book, even though it's written by a massively clever professor. So even if you didn't do science like me at uni, you'll still enjoy reading it. This book is a bit like Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, but far, far, far better because it's got a real optimism to it. You feel like E.O. Wilson is showing you a definite direction we should take. It's the best book on conservation and climate I've ever read, so I'd give it 5 stars out of 5. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.